Shane Beamer's got his work cut out for him, but how much work he's got to do, maybe a little bit more than we thought. Talking South Carolina football here on National Signing Day. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We would ask that you smash that like button. You also subscribe to the channel. That way you hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. We got Will Gunter on the line from 107.5 The Game, the all-new early game. Will, our guy there in Columbia, South Carolina. Will, how are we doing tonight?
It's as I look out the window, it's cold. It's a little rainy here in town. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. There's presents under the tree. The tree is decorated. I was actually, as we wrap this up, I'm going to try and do a little bit of baking and maybe watch some Christmas Vacation. Enjoy the evening. So it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas here.
Well, when you say try baking, does that mean you can't bake and you're going to give it a shot, or does that mean you really know what you're doing, but you're just kind of throwing it out like that?
I'm making an effort this year. I'm making a legitimate effort. I think I made Chex Mix the other day. I could have gone and bought it. I wanted to make Christmas Chex Mix, and by that I wanted it flavorful. I wanted it to either have a flavor or to be so overpowering that you said, I see what you did there. Cut back on it a little bit. And I think what I did is just make regular Chex Mix that you can go buy at the store. I think I figured out I had just the right ingredients of Worcestershire, butter, little garlic, some salt to make exactly whatever it was I did. It was Chex Mix, and that's not what I'm going for. I want something that's got a personal touch. Tonight, I think we're going to do some Buckeyes, maybe some peanut butter balls, and see what we get there. So I grew up doing that. Time to give it a try.
When you transition from salty to sweet, you're talking my lingo now. I'm all about that. We got the Christmas cookies and the chocolate chip cookies and the ice cream all tucked away in the kitchen right now. We're trying to make this video a little bit more pleasurable, maybe entertaining for South Carolina fans, because Will, you saw my reaction when I was looking up the rankings here, because I'm used to Will Muschamp winning 5, 6, 7 games a year, but he's posting recruiting classes in the top 25 in the nation, which of course gets you about 10th in the SEC, but 106 in the country.
Oh, Will Muschamp's not the coach anymore.
Well, I know he's not the coach, but he was bringing in top 20 recruiting classes.
This has been something that's coming. If you obviously, I could see it coming last year. I really don't think Will Muschamp got enough credit for last year's recruiting class. They were 4-8. And let's start. That's when this started. What happened today? What's happening right now started a year ago when South Carolina went 4-8, and you had board of trustees members, you had the president, you had the athletic director openly talking about his job. And I say he didn't get enough credit last year because despite all that happening in November of 2019 and finishing 4-8, being blown out of the stadium, a home game, by Clemson, he still managed to land a borderline 5-star running back in Marshawn Lloyd. He still managed to land an Elite 11 quarterback in Luke Doty. He held on to an elite linebacker, a 4-star linebacker in Mo Kaba. He landed a 4-star defensive lineman in Alex Hunley. And then on all that, he somehow landed 5-star defensive lineman and top 15 national prospect Jordan Birch. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, because there was really, at that time, you could see the writing on the wall in November of 2019 for Will Muschamp and for South Carolina football. Being a person who's covered recruiting for both ESPN and 24/7 Sports, you never recruit your current year, you recruit a year in advance. And so at that time, I said, oh boy, 4-8. And these guys talking about him, 2020 is going to be a rough class unless he can really, really get out there and prove people wrong in 2020. Well, obviously, they were 2-5 and he got fired, and they finished 2-8. Fast forward to today, you have a coaching transition. You had a class that, to begin with, even if Will Muschamp had stayed, was probably close to 50th in the country. You lost some really good commitments. They did lose a kid, Bryce Steele, a linebacker from North Carolina that I really liked, that went to Boston College. They lost a 6'5", 210-pound kind of defensive end Buck linebacker in George Wilson that I actually did not see who he committed to today. I think he committed probably to Florida State. He was going to choose Auburn, and then Gus Malzahn got fired, so I think he chose Florida State if he chose anybody. But you saw the class start to come unglued, and it's a whole nother conversation for probably a whole nother episode. But what Shane Beamer is doing now is his setting up of the South Carolina staff was never meant to be in place by today, just to land recruits. And let's be honest, it's a weird year to begin with. You got championship games this weekend. That's never happened. You've got coaches who are still coaching. South Carolina's not named an offensive or defensive coordinator. There's a lot of things happening right now. And I think in a way, it's by design. It's what Shane Beamer wants. He was not going to sell out. One thing I listened to Shane Beamer today talk about is loyalty. And not just loyalty to his team and his staff, but also to coaches who may be considering coming to South Carolina and not putting their name out there so that it drags down that other team and that other team's recruiting class. And I think Shane Beamer, to me, having watched this happen in years past, showed a lot of character today. I don't know if that'll translate to victories. That's what it is all about at the end of the day, is wins. But I did see a level of Shane Beamer and a reason why he's so highly respected in the coaching industry, because right now we're talking about Jay Bateman or I believe it's John Heacock at Iowa State. Jay Bateman, the defensive coordinator at North Carolina, or John Heacock, the defensive coordinator at Iowa State. The easiest thing in the world to do is to leak that information, and I guess it's kind of been leaked because I know about it, but it's to really leak it and say, hey, it's this guy or it's that guy, and it's probably going to be this guy, and then you mess with that recruiting class and you kind of mess with that guy's reputation. Shane Beamer didn't do it. You've got the statistic up that I can see right now, 14th in the SEC, 106 nationally. It was never about today. It's going to be about hitting the transfer portal. It's going to be about bringing in what junior college prospects and what guys are still available in January. But it's honestly also about what seniors can you get to come back next year that typically you wouldn't have. And then a freshman class that was the 19th rated class in the country last year. I just talked about some of those guys. They're freshmen again. You know what? They might not end up living up to their ranking, but they can be really good players, and it can bridge the gap in roster management from one year to the next as we try to figure out what the NCAA is going to do with an 85-man scholarship limit. So Shane Beamer was never, when he was hired 10 days ago, it was never about today. It was never about just filling the class with bodies. That's why you see the numbers the way they will be. I don't anticipate them being drastically better when we get to the next signing day. But what you're going to see is him try and mold this roster through transfers, players that fit in recruiting, and then also trying to maintain some of the guys that in a typical year would either advance to their sophomore year or would graduate and move on into the real world.
Well, we know that number is typically between 15 to 23, something in that range, in the high teens to low 20s that programs sign each and every year. They've only signed 7 players. So I would expect that 106 number to change, not to where it should be, but there's obviously a lot of loose ends out there.
Well, it could, but it could. There's your thing. If you take, I don't know what a fair number is. Let's just say 10 transfers. If you take 10 transfers, you might only take 7 more high school prospects. I don't think the number is not going to matter as much to me because, as I've pointed out, you've got a kid like Marshawn Lloyd who didn't play this year because he tore his ACL in preseason practice. But last year was a borderline 5-star prospect. Where do you want to spend your recruiting time on right now? Convincing that guy who was a 5-star prospect to come back to campus and join Kevin Harris, who was the leading rusher in the SEC? Or do you want to go and chase a 3-star running back prospect, 2-star running back prospect that can't visit your campus? Let's remember, recruiting's different 2020, and it'll be different for a bit of 2021. You can't get these kids onto campus to sell the football operations building that is phenomenal down here. You can't get them on campus to show them the football stadium or the campus itself, or take them down to Village Idiot for a pizza and show them around kind of the nightlife, the campus area. You can't do that. Everything's through Zoom meetings. You're going to have to rely on the transfer portal, and again on convincing some of your own team that they need to stick in there, and they need to hold in and to get back to that 85-man scholarship limit. If you do it right, it'll pay off. It will pay off, because you're going to see teams in the next 2 or 3 years try to figure out how to get back to that 85-man scholarship limit. And we don't know how the NCAA is going to do that, but it's going to require management, and most importantly, it's going to require wins. It all sounds good on December 16th. It will be awful if we're sitting here a year from today and South Carolina goes 4-8 again, and everybody's questioning the Shane Beamer hire. So it comes down to wins, really, to resolve this situation, and we won't know for another 2 or 3 years if they played this correctly.
It's a day in which college football fans, 90-some% of them, latch on to one number, and that's the national rank of the recruiting class next to that particular team. And if they look at South Carolina, they're going to be shocked. They're going to do a double take like I did. I looked at do I got basketball? What do I got going here? But when it comes right down to it, yeah, there's a lot more involved every year, but certainly this year in regards to that senior class possibly coming back. And then, of course, as you mentioned, with the transfer and the transfer portal being just a completely free agent aspect to college football that we've never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, South Carolina's got he talked about it in the press conference. I want to say seven seniors that hypothetically could come back. I'm not a draft analyst. I don't ever pretend to be. But that I don't think are draft-worthy prospects. One of them is the tight end, Nick Muse, who is coming off an ACL injury from 2019, is a good prospect. He's a good player. His brother, Tanner Muse, was a very good safety at Clemson. Nick has had some good moments, but tore his ACL. He was a senior. He could go pro. I don't know if he'd be drafted, but, when you come off those ACLs, not everybody heals in 6 months, and he tore it in November of 2019. Given the COVID restrictions and how you can work out, all the things that were involved in May and June and July, I don't know if he was able to rehab. It seemed like he started the season slow. Nick Muse is a guy that if he comes back, that's a major part of the offense in 2021. Jabari Ellis is a defensive lineman who's been in college for 5 years already. And you know what? If you get a guy back like that for his 6th year, and he started a good bit this year, but he didn't have a great year. He had a good year, not a great year. Look, the defense stunk as a whole. Nobody had a great year. But if you get a guy back like that, would you rather take a guy like that who can contribute right away, or do you want to go out and take a chance on a mid or low 3-star who's going to need time to develop? One thing about this hire, Shane Beamer is going to be given a little bit of a honeymoon. He's going to be given some time, but he's not going to be given a ton of time. You can't come out of the gate and go 3-9 or 4-8 next year, especially when 3 of those games are against Eastern Illinois, Troy, and a trip to East Carolina. So that should be 3 wins, not counting a game against Vanderbilt. The rest of the schedule we'll have to figure out and see who's good and who's not when we get around to August. But you're not going to have that time frame. So Shane Beamer's got to win. So if you can convince some of those guys and they eat up those scholarships, so be it. You got to do it. It's a weird year for recruiting. And I'll be honest, as a guy who did recruiting, when you look at analyzing for people who are real good in the industry, Rusty Manziel is really good in Georgia. The fact that these kids weren't able to go to camps as much as they typically do and be seen by college players, college coaches, hurts their rankings. I think you got to be very careful labeling the 5-star guys, the elite 4-star guys, what they are, and expecting them to come in and be elite right off the bat. There's a kid that South Carolina landed today that I really like, Nicholas Barrett, a 6'4", 320-pound defensive lineman out of North Carolina, is a guy that I talked to a lot of people. He's got a bunch of raw talent. He didn't get to play his senior year. Big kid, didn't get to play his senior year, and there's a lot of people that I talked to that I trusted. If he plays his senior year, he probably gets some much, much bigger offers because he was developing. There's a chance he doesn't stick in this class. He's going to need development when he gets on campus. He just missed a year of football. But you're also going to have to watch that when it comes to recruiting rankings. We know Alabama landed some elite guys. We know Ohio State did. Georgia, LSU, Clemson, those top 5 schools, they got great classes. They'll stockpile talent. You get past about 10, I'm going to tell you right now, not being able to evaluate those kids and see them a little bit is going to come back to haunt some coaches. And it's not just going to be at 1 or 2 schools. You're going to see that transfer portal really, really go crazy over the next 2 or 3 years as some misevaluations occurred because you weren't able to do your due diligence that these coaches spend 24 hours a day trying to do.
Will Gunter's our South Carolina go-to guy from 107.5 The Game. The all-new early game is his show there. Will, we always appreciate it. We don't want to hold up the baking any longer than we need to because you got to jump on that. It's Christmas time.
Christmas, yeah, like try and get it done. Get up bright and early to talk about signing day tomorrow on the radio show. So I appreciate you turning me loose to go give it my best shot.